The reason that well, probably is an alright thing to say about a product you want to sell. But coming to China, for instance, it doesn't really, it's not received the exact same way, because a Chinese will say probably the best beer. I think I'll go for the best beer. Why take the second class beer? Why drink that? Why not take the best one? So really, this is an instance of a very typical Danish mindset, and the Danish mindset that is interesting and something that you need to know more about. So how do you deal with being culturally intelligent? Well, at least there's two parts, and there's two parts I want to focus on today. And one of them is what we call the Understand 2010 study, like a Christmas gift. Why is this so? Why do the Danes behave the way they do? Why do they leave work at 4 o'clock? Why do they go home? Why is the work-life balance the way it is? Why is it difficult to make friends? And give people a general understanding of that, because it's important to get an understanding about why people are the way they are if you want to work. Because you can't respect people and you can't recognize them if you have absolutely no idea about the rationale behind their actions. If you have no idea, if you just kind of realize, well, Danes, for some reason, I don't know why, are doing this or that, you can't stand working with us. Because it'll make no sense. And if things doesn't make sense, it's unbearable. So an understanding about the apparently strange behavior is absolutely imperative. And, of course, it creates the competence and recognition and respect. But a deeper understanding creates a competence, so you know how to deal with a situation you weren't prepared for. That's different than reading a lot of do's and don'ts in a guidebook about what to do and what not to do in another culture. That will only give you very limited amount of knowledge that you can only use for very limited situations. If you want to have a deeper understanding of it, you need to understand why is it that these people do what they do. And from that on, you can respect and recognize them. The other part is action. Understanding is very good. If you can't put it into action, it's not really much worth. So, for us, a culturally intelligent mindset also creates better ways of dealing with it, action-wise. So, finding new ways of taking action, specifically related to that new context you're in, that's an important part of being culturally intelligent. I'll give you some advice here today during this talk. Because the action also makes a change of mindset, she makes new interpretations and new action patterns for you to follow. So, what I want to do is to take one of the specific things that Nina also mentioned and just look at that. And that's why I call this talk The Stranger, because it has to do with that. The feeling that a lot of expats get in Denmark, or green card holders in general get when they come to Denmark, that it's difficult to kind of get into that community. This is from a quite interesting little thing you can read. I think it's on Facebook. If you Google, you have been in Denmark too long when. There's a lot of things that people experience that they start to do when they're really fully integrated in Danish society. Like, for instance, you think it's impolite to sit next to someone on a bus if there's a bench where you can sit on your own. It is. You go into a Danish bus, and it's very important that you find the exact seat that's furthest away from everybody else that would be there. Remember that. It's terribly impolite to sit next to somebody that's a vacant seat. And what does that look like from an outsider's perspective? Well, that's the interesting part, is that when people come to Denmark and see stuff like that, they start to interpret it. Well, they interpret it with rules from their own culture. That means, well, if the Danes don't want to sit next to me in a bus, the Great Next Time Denmark started in this blog on their website. And it went completely crazy in many ways, because when I read it, I kind of get a bad feeling in my stomach, because it's rather harsh, the comments about these Danes that are completely impossible to contact and won't talk to anybody and so forth. And that gets kind of a story that will be around the expat environment, and it's difficult to combat that with a counter story, so to speak. And it's everywhere, even in the media, because a lot of Danes have also, it says, Danes are weird, and this is a manager from France who also experienced Danes being somewhat hard to get in contact with. And now I'm going to present you with the exact same figures as Nina, because in the expat study now in 2010, is Denmark a good bad host country when it comes to being open and inviting? We have good, very good, 30%. That's, I think it was played 33 actually in 2006, so it's actually getting worse. So that's not good. Bad, very bad, 43%. That's not very much. Expat surprised negatively by this lack of openness after arrival, 41%. Or pretty still incompetent. And we went back to being a very small community again. Where a lot of other countries that had an empire, had colonies, well, they exchanged some of these people. They had people moving out and people moving in. We didn't really. We lost all of these colonies before we actually got a real exchange. And we don't have any indigenous populations. These people from these countries we never really had much to do with. If you look at it from a perspective of population here, you have in the 18th century an immigration of 20 foreigners a year. That is ridiculous. Compared to almost any other country, that's nothing. And in 1900 we have 5,688 foreigners, not counting though Germans and Swedes in the country. I'm telling you this so you know that it's just a country who's not very used to receiving guests. That these cartoons could actually be read and seen and watched over computer screens all over the world. And that people were starting to burn our flags. That's quite surprising. We're used to being only Israeli and American flags. But then suddenly it was our flags. So a lot of, actually some Danish companies started shipping more flags to the Middle East just to make a good sell out of this. Because we're simply used to that. And again, it has again to do with what has happened during our history. And made Denmark what Sir James has said, a tribal community. The Danish is not a nation in normal sense, but a tribe that is the community strength and the reason for their unshakable trust. Closely knit, small differences, quite isolated from the others. That's what created that community. And the result is somewhat negative also. Here we have the Ministry of Education who tried to measure the level of cultural competence in Denmark. And it's not that impressive really. The high cultural competence were 5%, 29% is the middle, and 66% low cultural competence. But that again has to do before that Denmark is kind of superior to the others. That you know, if you go to Asia, well, Asia is basically just robots, isn't it? It's just people who are going to just follow orders, do exactly what they're told, who do not have any creative mindset of their own, who just do exactly as you told them to. Like for instance on the World Cup, we hear constantly Danish journalists talking about the Japanese robots. Who's going to, and actually the Japanese robots won over the Danish teams.
Can you explain a little bit more with some examples?
Yeah. Well, a lot of social life in Denmark is that, for instance, you have to be there on time. You know, you have to be there. If you're invited to 8 o'clock, you're going to be there at 8 o'clock. And you're expected that dinner is set and you'll start eating, and you can't invite somebody else. You can't bring a stranger to a family to a dinner in Denmark without that you let them know in advance. A lot of things for social life is much more formalized when it comes to dressing. The interesting thing is that it's kind of reversed in Denmark. You dress down for work, but you dress up for social life. You wear a tie when you're going to the movies instead of when you're going to work. Because we feel relaxed at work, but we feel a bit more uptight when we have to socialize. So there's just much more rules out there in Danish social life, and it's good not to feel too relaxed and too much at home. Although Danes will say feel at home, you have to be careful. You have to look for that. And I've just heard a lot of Danes complaining that expats tend to bring a friend. And how are you to bring a friend if they're not invited? There's going to be food for only that number of persons, and it's just going to look strange. So again, things are a little bit more uptight in Danish social life than we would be used to. So you just have to live with that. We just have to follow suit, as I tell them. When in Rome, do the Romans. That's the most clever thing to do. His way, that should be clear to everybody. But nobody would help him. He said, if that had been in India, there'd be 20 people there giving you direction, 20 different directions, but still they would be trying. But when I asked for it, there was no end to them. They would drive me there. But I just, in Denmark, because they just asked. Because we would be sitting and saying, oh, it's the flip side of the welfare state. Welfare state is a good thing, but it can also create a distance between people.
From Danish companies is not as strong now as it was a year ago. So at the present situation, I think one of the challenges is, on the one hand, to inform foreign job seekers about the employment possibilities in Denmark, in doing it in a way so that we do not raise false expectations. And on the other hand, we have to be prepared for the coming shortages of labor. So, but I think overall, it does. This situation does not give reason to question the need for foreign labor. If we want to maintain a modern welfare society, it is extremely important that we do not lose sight of the real long-term challenges. And I think earlier today we already stressed some of these challenges. First of all, the demographic. And second, the need for highly qualified labor. I think our future as a knowledge-based and innovative economy depends on how good we will be in attracting good foreign employees. What we could do better on, I think, is that we have to face the fact that Denmark is not the first choice for foreigners. So we have to tell better stories about Denmark. Not to tell stories that are not true, but